Welcome back to the Career Equation podcast. And today we're diving into one of the oldest and most powerful ideas in storytelling, the hero's journey. We'll be showing you how does this apply directly to your career and your life plans. We'll be sharing how you can make use of this amazing myth-making tool to really understand and navigate your career changes with more confidence, to dip into your motivation and self-understanding, and to help yourself to keep going when the going gets tough. This is also a fantastic tool for any coaches or managers helping others to navigate change, and a wonderful way for organizations to reimagine change in a more creative way. We hope that you will enjoy it.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosna. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Hello, Zoe. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you. It's so good to see you again. And the summer's over. Well, the sun's still shining here. I don't know about you. What is it like outside your window today?
It is still bright and beautiful in gorgeous Brighton. I have to be grateful for that. But I'm excited about the autumn numbness that's kicking in. I love this time of year. So you've been on holiday, haven't you? Tell me a little bit about what you've been up to this summer.
Oh, so we had a bit of a staycation this year because we went away. We were abroad earlier in the year this year. We trundled all the way from the south coast to the North Devon coast. And then we topped it off with a rush across from North Devon to Wembley Stadium last week to watch Coldplay in concert. What about you? What's been keeping you busy?
Yeah, we've also been doing a fair amount of gallivanting, little day trips mainly, things like Portsmouth and the maritime museums there. We also went over to Devon and did some crabbing and cockle evacuating and all kinds of things that small children like doing on beaches. Small children just happy on beaches. And if your small child is happy, you too are happy.
Brilliant. And of course, it is that sort of back to new beginnings almost, isn't it, at this time of year? A great opportunity to dive back into podcasting.
Absolutely. And I think for lots of people, we start to think about what can I get done before the end of the year? What are the kind of missions I want to accomplish so that I can finish up 2025 saying that I made these things happen? And if that's your beef today, then that's going to be a really super duper thing for us to touch on together. Getting things done and completing cycles is really our theme for today, but in the context of exploring a particularly useful model that's been profoundly effective for me as an individual, as a coach, and for our clients. So today we're on the hero's journey. And as you know, Zoe, I'm a huge fan of this storytelling framework and the ways that this narrative structure can really transfer over to better understanding and navigating our lives. I actually discovered it when I was on a biographical storytelling training back in 2004. My grandmother used to design radar and spy equipment in Soviet Russia, and I wanted to extract some of her stories and perform them as a storytelling show. So I was on this training. And while I was there, I quickly saw that this hero's journey structure could have huge transferability for the career coaching training that I was doing at the time. And I've since been weaving and sequencing it into our methodology for career conversation and career navigation. So I'm really excited for us to be today introducing it to our listeners. Do you want to get us started, Zoe?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And as you say, it's a very famous framework when it comes to writers, and they've been using it for years. But it's really only just being discovered in the sort of more personal development and coaching world. And it's a term that was coined by the late Joseph Campbell, who was an American author and professor at Sarah Lawrence College. And he'd mapped out folklore and the myths across the world and discovered that really there was just one structure of classic storytelling amongst them, where the hero goes on this quest and transforms as a result of their journey. And that's been told over and over again and understood by every sort of culture and every tradition. And he called this the hero's journey. And it really is described as a sort of map, if you like, behind all those great myths and adventures and transformations. You can literally see this map laying out before you as you embark on these stories. But the twist is, from our point of view, is that we believe that you are the hero in your own story. Your career, your choices, your challenges, they're all part of your own personal quest. So tell us a little bit more about the kind of whole big idea of this, Erica.
Yeah, so the hero's journey is something that you see played out again and again in classic storytelling, classic films, whether it's Harry Potter or Star Wars or Silverado. I'm showing my age with all of those examples, but any great story in it follows this classic structure. And we're going to break that down for you in a minute. But broadly speaking, the opportunity is that when you see your career or your life or a particular element of those that you want to shift within the lens of this classic story framework, everything starts to make a lot more sense. It just comes alive. And it stops us thinking about change as random or chaotic, or the trials and adversities and the things always take longer and are more complicated than we thought. We stop experiencing those as failures and instead start seeing them as a crucial aspect of the story and of the experience. If you think about a hero's journey, any kind of quest or adventure, if it was just like the hero wanted to do something grand and difficult, then they did it, the end, that would not be a great tale. In between are all these trials and adversities and challenges that they have to overcome. And actually, this framework mirrors our own lives when we go on journeys of change and transformation. So in any story arc, there are twists, there are turns, there are challenges. And the more that we can get our head around the idea that that's normal for our own transformation, the more robust we can become in the face of it. And it's my view, actually, that's why these stories are so addictive and satisfying to us when we watch a classic heroine's journey, that the story structure actually maps to how life happens for us. It was almost like life happened that way first, and then the classic storytellers started reflecting that in the telling of the tale, and it eventually became this structure that you see played out again and again. And I think it gives us a lot of hope, a lot of wisdom, a lot of tenacity when we watch this being played out, whether it's on the big screen or in a biopic where we see someone overcome adversity, and that satisfaction of seeing a completed cycle, even if the hero doesn't exactly get what he or she planned. I think a great example, actually, this from a recent biopic that I watched is the Simone Biles documentary, where, of course, we know that she had some real setbacks and challenges. She needed to step back to take care of herself and come back bigger and better. And there's something very kind of magical, touching, rewarding for us on a very human level when we experience that happening and observing it in others. But of course, it's also really helpful then to be able to go, hey, maybe that map might apply to me. And maybe those touch points might be places I'm touching into as I transform. And if you had a map for transformation, be it in your career, in your health, in your life, in new hobbies you want to take up, how useful would that be? And if you think that would be useful, then you've got to stay tuned and have a little listen to this next bit.
Exactly, Erica. I mean, that narrative gives us so much meaning in our lives. And when you were describing them, they're like just thinking about stories and adventures on TV and the cinema, etc., we were often drawn to it because there is a sort of familiarity about not exactly what they're going through, but this kind of sense of connection about things have been tough or things are great right now, or what have I learned from that? So that really helps us to understand who we are, where we come from in this world and where we're heading. And I think it gives us real confidence when things get tough. Because if we're really centered in this journey that we're going on and where we're heading and why we're doing it, we keep going, don't we, when the going gets tough? And we see that played out in film and stories that we read. Because in every single one, there is some sense of toughness in there at some point that they've got to overcome these challenges. So it's really interesting, I think, to dive into this. But most interesting is how it can help support us, I think, in our own learning and our own lives. So let's touch a little bit more on where all this comes from, Erica.
Yeah. So when Joseph studied all this work on myth and legend, he mapped out and looked at all of the different storytelling frameworks, all of the different cultural traditions. And eventually he came to a sort of conclusion about what he called the monomyth, the one story that we were telling over and over. And broadly speaking, the framework looks like this. The hero decides that they want to make a change of some kind. They feel moved towards that. They might be pushed into that, or they might be drawn into that. But one way or another, they decide to commit. And then after they commit, they have lots of adventures. They get ready to go on a big quest. They face challenges. They find friends and allies and mentors and support. They go through some terrible tribulation or ordeal. And then on the back of that, they come back transformed by their experience and re-enter normal life again, but as a person who has evolved as a result of their journey. It seems like a familiar journey, doesn't it? That's something that we've heard of before.
Absolutely. Such a familiar story. And I think if you are an avid reader or film watcher and you're kind of now thinking, this all does seem familiar. I can think of a story, perhaps it is Frodo. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. So perhaps it is Frodo and when he embarks on the challenges with his fellowship and they go on this epic adventure to defy all the odds. Or you're a Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz fan and her crusade to just get home. Or maybe even Harry Potter, who starts off under the stairs in a cupboard and then battles with Voldemort. What we can take for this is that it isn't just in fairy tales. These stories play out in real life for us, in our careers, in our relationships, in our growth. And the hero's journey can be a real map for those transformations for sure. We've seen it ourselves, Erica, haven't we? Played out time and time again in our own coaching practices, that our clients perhaps are sure they need to make a change, but that road feels like super daunting. And that they know there's going to be trials and difficulty along the way. And it can perhaps often sort of scare them off at the beginning and worry and maybe delay things. Or perhaps they've sometimes begun a shift and things are becoming difficult and they're losing confidence. And will they ever reach the other side? There's lots of examples where we, through our coaching practice, have come into our clients' journeys with them to see where they are there at that particular point, where they've come from, which part of the story they're in, and how we can help to support them to move through that map, if you like. So let's dive into this framework a little bit more closely so that we can start to see how this map might be able to align and help you pinpoint exactly where you are in your own hero's quest and how you can use the model to help keep you on task and keep going even when it does get tough.
Definitely. So I'm going to do the sort of creative side of the map, and then Zoe's going to break it down for how it might look in relation to your career journey. And if you imagine this map a little bit like a clock, and at 12 o'clock, right at the top, we've got the call. So if you're Batman, you receive an actual call on the bat phone. But for most of us, the call is a push or a pull, could be gentle, could be quite forceful, that encourages us to think about something different. So in the Harry Potter context, an owl arrives with a scroll telling him that he's on his way to Hogwarts, this magical school. And that sounds like quite an opportunity because his life is pretty sucky before. And so that would be an example of a pull, an opportunity that's desirable to us. But equally, something can be a push. We can be forced out of the nest. We can have some shock come to us, a bereavement, a health issue. So again, at the beginning of stories, we often also see something quite brutal initiating a change. And generally, we tend to resist the call because the call means moving out of what is known into what's unknown. And as human beings, that is not something that we like doing and that we're genetically programmed to resist. So the first point on the journey is the call.
Absolutely. And from a work sort of perspective, what we're thinking about here are things like a pull or a push towards something that might be in relation to a job opportunity where it's a pull towards this new job opportunity, perhaps a promotion. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some new learning and take a qualification in the next step, ready to move you on to something new. Sometimes the push is uncomfortable because it might be in relation to changes or organizational structures being changed at work. Perhaps you're facing redundancy. Perhaps you're coming back from a period of ill health and it feels a bit daunting to return to work. So those sort of work contexts work perfectly against the story map of a pull or push, which is a call to adventure.
And so often it starts off gentle and it gets louder. And the more that we resist, the more that call persists until we get to a point where actually, as Anais Nin said, the pain of staying in a bud is greater than the risk that it takes to blossom. So eventually we come to a point where we are ready to move to the 3 o'clock on the clock, which is the commitment. The commitment is the point at which we would decide that we are going to make something happen. It isn't necessarily when that thing is immediately completed. We might decide and then need to make quite a bit of preparation before we take our next step. Jason and the Golden Fleece, for example, he decides that he's going to go and capture this fleece, and therefore he's going to need all kinds of support and help. He's going to need a crew, he's going to need resources, he's going to need the tides to be on his side. We can't always take off the moment that we commit, but commitment is an important announcement to ourselves, most importantly, and to others that we're going to take this thing seriously and we're going to start moving in that direction. So what might that look like in terms of work?
I think you hit the nail on the head to start with, that it can be a real internal commitment. So like, I've seen this opportunity for a job and I am going to go for this. And sometimes it might be, as Erica's described, that you've heard this sort of opportunity before and you've let it go. You've let it pass you. The time hasn't felt right. So this is as much an internal, I think, commitment about making changes, whether that is, yes, I'm going to take this course because it's going to advance my studies so that I can take a future promotion opportunity. Yes, I'm going to polish off my CV and step into new territory with the world of work. So that internal commitment, but it can be a declaration externally as well. So it may be that actually part of that is declaring to your partner, your family, a colleague, a manager that I've seen this thing and I'm going to go for it and I want your support along the way. So as much as an internal as potentially an external commitment too.
And it can happen within the job as well, right? Might be a side project you start developing, might be a network you decide to get involved in. So it can be moving on, but it can also be moving into and deepening your practice in something. And so now we're in the quest. So let's call that around sort of 5 o'clock. And this is the montage scene from Rocky. This is where we all gather up our resources and we get ready to go. We begin our expedition. We find our Yoda mentor. You know, it's generally a time where a lot of energy is released because the tension between resisting the call and finally making the commitment takes up a lot of time and energy, doesn't it? When you're in a dilemma, when you're in a dichotomy, when you know that something needs to move, but you're not ready to take action. Suddenly, when you step over what we call the threshold of the commitment and you enter into the spirit of the quest, it can be a very joyful, buoyant, kind of exciting time. Lots of things to do, lots of stuff to get organised. And in our careers, of course, a quest is a very active time too. What might that look and feel like?
Absolutely. It's really about not just physical resource gathering, but also emotional resource gathering as well, I think. So if I was going to embark on, I commit to taking a project management course, then I've got to do my research about which one am I going to do? When's it going to start? How am I going to fund it? What about time off? Am I going to need to get some permission to take some study time? If I'm facing a redundancy situation, so I'm being pushed into something, it's about, okay, what resources are there to support me through this period? What's the company offering? What research can I do myself to help me get prepared? What free learning can I absorb myself in? So I'm really starting to gather the things together that are going to help me get through this journey, a bit like filling up my backpack with all the things that are going to keep me nourished along the way. And of course, that means mindset as well. So about taking control of the situation rather than feeling like I'm being done to, particularly when we've been pushed into situations. Like what helps me to feel more in control and how can I sort of reflect on that? But also I think it's about people resources as well. You know, who is going to help me along this journey? Who do I need to turn to? Is there a mentor, a manager that I think would be a real good wingman for me along here, or a friend or a colleague that will have my back or keep me accountable or might just check in with me? I think this is such an important phase to gather together those things that are going to keep you going when it does get tough, because we kind of know what's coming, but will help you prepare and put your sort of best foot forward after you've committed to it.
We're trying something new in 2026 in the Career Equation. We're inviting you to send an anonymous message, a career conundrum that you might like Zoe or I to solve. Whether you're thinking about how to start a conversation to develop your best people, or whether you're an individual thinking about your next move, you can drop us a line at pod@thecareerequation.com with just a short voice note with your name and your question, or a written message that we can read out and help solve your career conundrum online. So please do send us a message at pod@thecareerequation.com, and we look forward to supporting you.
So here we are now at, let's say, 7 o'clock on the clock, and we call this the belly of the whale. So this is a reference that Campbell made to the story of Jonah from the Bible, where he gets swallowed up by this whale and it's dark and lonely and fishy smelling in there, and he's thinking, what the heck? And isn't it just always the way in a hero story? We start off well, we're excited, it's exciting, and then suddenly the road into the forest gets darker and lonelier, and night begins to fall, and we start to run out of food or confidence or resources, and we think, oh, am I ever going to get where I need to go? And we recognize that we are too far gone to go back and start again, but that we still have a lot of journey and challenge ahead of us. And it's really normal at this point that our confidence and our energy takes a dip. And in any classic hero story, you'll see this moment where a sort of darkness before the dawn of, what are we really thinking? Are we ever going to get this thing done? Perhaps they've had a few tries at something and it just hasn't gone their way. So the belly of the whale is this natural but painful anchor point before we really start to get into our final battles and our return, which tells us we're really quite far along. We're already at 7 o'clock, but it doesn't feel like we're making the inroads that we would like. And of course, this is often reflected in career navigation and experiences, right?
Absolutely. I think we probably can all recognize moments where we're in that dark place thinking, what on earth am I doing here? Whether that's something that you've chosen and you thought, why? And why did I commit to this thing in the beginning? Or whether you've been pushed and you're like, I didn't want to be here in the first place. Thank you very much. But it's to know, I think what is really helpful is to know that in any journey, there's usually a period of darkness where you think this is really super tough. So that's helpful in itself to recognize that. But in terms of work, we might see that as, I don't know, perhaps you've got a big pitch presentation you're about to do and you do a trial run and it all goes horribly wrong. You fluff your lines, you can't get your breath control, and you think, I don't want to do this anyway. That's something that I think lots of us might have felt if we've done sort of presentations and things in the past. Perhaps it's that you've applied for 100 jobs and you're just not hearing anything back. And that is so dark and lonely. And so that can make you think about, why am I even bothering? And one of the things I often reflect, just personally myself, I do this, but certainly when I'm coaching as well, is that this is why that kind of call and commitment stage is super, super important. Because when the going gets tough, we want to glance back at that picture of like, why did we say we were going to do this thing in the beginning? What was it that excited and drove us towards it or made us take control? And what's the outcome that we're looking for here? Because that can sometimes help to keep us going when it gets tough, as well as the quest part where we've gathered our resources. So this is where we do speak to our mentor, we do speak to our colleagues, our friends to say, this is really tough. I could do with some support here. Or will you help me practice? Will you look at my CV for me and just say, am I getting something wrong? Is that why I'm not hearing back? So super, super important to reconnect with our purpose and our reason why, I think, at this stage.
Yeah. And I'm just reflecting as you're speaking about the times that I've got into the belly of the whale and how helpful it's been to know that I'm there, particularly with things like product launches where you worked incredibly hard on something and the deadline's looming and you think, I'm never going to get this done. No one's ever going to pay attention to it anyway. My boss is going to hate it. Like that kind of thing where you've invested a lot of energy, you're heading to a deadline and things are rumbling along and they're not necessarily going smoothly. Or to your point about applying, so many of my clients contact me one-to-one and say, I've been in the final two far too many times and I'm just not making the final one. And there's a kind of fine tuning to happen between the difference between giving up because something is getting difficult and giving up because you've actually exhausted all possibilities and it isn't the right thing. And that's what career coaching and discussion around that can be really helpful at that point, because generally with the belly of the whale, if we push on through to the supreme ordeal, the grand challenge, which we're going to talk about in a minute, we get a result out the other side and we experience the transformation. But there are occasionally times where actually we are banging our head against a brick wall and we need to change the way in which we're approaching the thing in order to conquer the grand challenge, whether that's the pitch, the launch, the interview, the promotion, etc. The supreme ordeal is, let's say, around 8 o'clock on the clock. So we are hurtling back towards 12, but we still haven't got to the scary bit. So in every great story, there is always a supreme ordeal. There is a handbags at dawn moment, whether it is Voldemort and Potter, whether it is like Erin Brockovich and the final stand in court. It's the big test, the grand trial, where you prove to yourself that you can do what it is that you set out to do. And you go and do it, whether you succeed or fail. And that could be an exam, it could be a birth, it could be a recovery, but it's about this defining moment where, again, we step into what we've been preparing for. And of course, lots of moments of that in our careers and in our work.
Absolutely, yeah. And you've mentioned a few already, but it could be the big interview where you're finally sat in front of that board of people that you've been dreaming about being in front of. Maybe it is running a huge workshop for a group of people, of peers that you're training on a new system. You've been practicing your pitch and pulling all of your information together. Perhaps it is that final exam. I've done all the coursework so far and now I've got to do this thing. Those are the big moments. And as Erica said, they're not always still going to be moments that you win. They won't always necessarily end in the perfect result that you were after when you set out at the beginning, but you're still going to go through this thing. You're still going to step into that fear, if you like, and out of your comfort zone and do this thing that you've been building towards through this whole process.
And finally, out the back of that, and we get to 10, if you like, on the clock, the return. And the return is the idea that the hero or heroine now steps back from this extraordinary adventure they've been on. They step back into the ordinary world, in inverted commas, as Campbell calls it. The return to normal life with lessons, with gifts, with experience. Sometimes you're Moses and you're hoiking some heavy tablets of wisdom. Sometimes you're a new parent and you're holding a healthy child. Sometimes you are coming back just with the ability to accompany someone else on a journey that's been similar to yours. And also, it's a time of celebration and reintegration. And I think in this sort of alpha type world, we're really bad at this. No sooner have we achieved something significant that's on our list, we start looking up again for the next thing on the list, instead of really taking that time to reintegrate, to celebrate, and to discover who we've become. And of course, the person who returns is slightly different to the person who started. And so sometimes we find that we accomplish our goal, but it doesn't quite feel exactly the way that we thought it would. I had a recent Good Housekeeping column about this, about people securing their dream job and then going, oh, it's not quite as dreamy as I thought it was. And some of that is because you've now experienced it and you've become a new person as a result. So the return is all about this integration and sharing our benefits, our boons with the community around us.
Absolutely. And of course, from a work context, it may be an elation. You might have got the job, you might have passed the exam, you might have got the promotion, but you might not have. And it might be with much more of a sort of reflective mind that we then think about, what have I learned and how have I grown? And quite often, actually, we don't get what we set out for in the beginning, but we get something else. And that can be just the personal growth through, actually, I've now got a much, much better CV, or I'm much better polished at my interviews. I might not have got it that time, but I've had some amazing feedback and I've really got a good sense of how to present myself at interview. So the learning is a key part of this. And Erica's absolutely right. We very often come out the back of a supreme ordeal and jump straight into the next call or push towards something. But I'm real believer in just like taking some time to kind of like gather, like, what have I discovered in this process? Like, how have I changed? What would I do differently if I was doing this again? And importantly, how can I share what I've learned with others? Because, that personal growth can be growth for someone else as well. And I think that's really important about this stage. And you're absolutely right. We're very good at celebrating the wins as humans. We're not always very good at reflecting on the challenges and learning from it before we step back in again. So what we would say in kind of reflection of those key stages, those key sort of points on that map, is that every career worth having will take you through those stages like again and again. And that's why we say career is not a ladder. It really is an adventure. It's full of choices, full of twists and turns and highs and lows, celebrations and challenges. It really is. But having this framework is really helpful. So let's think then about how we can put this into action in terms of how can this framework really help you? Well, first, I think when we look at the map and we see where the parallel of experiences are in terms of what you've had before in your own life, you can see how that then begins to map out. So when it comes to perhaps a current challenge that you might be facing or a current goal that you would love to achieve, you can begin to think, where am I on the map right now in relation to this? How far have I come along so far? Then you can begin to think about, what do I need to do next to move on? What's the reflection I can do that's helped me going to move on to the next stage? Perhaps we can draw on, when have I been here before? Like, when have I been in this belly of the well? And what did I do at that point? What helped or hindered me? What could I do differently? So we can begin to map out our experiences on this hero's journey. And when we do that, it really does become more meaningful because we've got this sense of momentum as we push through the journey and we push through the map. And that can be very empowering in itself and fuel our motivation to keep going.
And we're meaning-making machines, right? It's really helpful to have a framework to structure our sense of meaning and progress in the things that we're trying to accomplish. And sometimes when I show the hero's journey to people, they'll say things, I'm not heroic, I'm not courageous, I don't do big stuff. And I just want to point out that if you have grown up, you have taken a hero's journey. If you have left home, you have taken a hero's journey. If you started a family, you have taken a hero's journey. If you've had any sort of role, volunteering, responsibility, job, you've taken a hero's journey. If you've overcome any obstacles or any health or mental health challenges, you've taken a hero's journey. Really to just understand that these things, that this isn't about scale. Sometimes the word hero then puts this pressure about, it has to be an extraordinary and kind of grandiose thing that nobody else has ever done ever. No, the hero's journey is just the title for the map. And the hero is the central character. We've got to call them something. And you are the central character in your life story. So being able to frame it as, okay, if you're uncomfortable with the hero, if that feels grandiose, let's just call it the character's journey, the person's journey, the life journey. But the idea is that there is an individual who is taking this journey alongside other people, certainly with help from other people, but it's their journey. If you're looking to learn the piano, other people have learned the piano before, other people will learn the piano after, but this is your journey in relation to mastering the piano. Yeah. So it's about this idea of really empowering you by feeling that you are the central character. Because when you feel that you're the central character in the story, it stops you feeling like life is happening to you and instead gives you the sense of orchestrating, of having agency and resilience and purpose in whatever it is that you strive to achieve. And of course, this works, and I think I've given you a few examples, outside of career. We're talking about it mainly in relation to career today, but it works with anything that's important to you. And I'm sure that on the back of this, you're probably already thinking about times throughout your life where this pattern feels familiar and where you have completed this cycle. And indeed, you may have several cycles running at the same time at different stages of completion in different aspects of your life.
When you were talking then about different inside and outside of life, I was thinking about sports people in terms of heading into the Olympics or something. These people often don't get the gold medal that they were hoping for, but yet they go through this story again and again. And each time they grow slightly more as an individual, or the people around them are tuning in more to what's going to make them successful. So absolutely can come back and go through this map time and time again. And we won't always have the perfect outcome, but just knowing that it's going to be difficult along the way is super, super helpful. And when it comes to career changes, I think that having this map can really help it feel less daunting and can help us be a little bit more creative, because it's giving us a language then. So like I can say, I'm in the belly of the whale right now. This is bloody difficult and it's really tough, but I've got this. We can start to change the language. I've got this. I've been here before. I made it out last time. And that's much more grounding than just this kind of perception of, oh, I'm failing. I'm just failing time and time again. You're not failing. You're going through this journey, and you will continue to go through journeys like this and be different every time you do it. So we've seen how helpful a shared language is as well for groups of people. So when we share our experiences together and then our opportunities, we can really begin to connect with each other through this powerful storytelling and this powerful map to kind of see where others are and how we can help and support each other and connect.
Yeah. And the career equation, how does that play into this then? Well, the equation is all about helping you to understand who the hero is in the story. What is it that makes you tick? Where have you come from? What are you designed for? Where are you going to? What are your aspirations? And connecting into doing the work of the career equation, defining what your equation is, can really help you to know that you are in the right adventure, that you're making the right decisions, the right investments of time and energy on things that really suit who you are and what you care about. And that's, again, where the career equation over and over again just really supports people. The more that you get to know what are your motivations, what are your talents and skills, what's your aspiration, where's your sweet spot, so that the future choices that you make about which journeys you go on and how you go about them on the journey, you're going to have all of that clarity to support you in responding to the call and making the commitment, and having the knowledge of the resources that you've already got in your backpack, but the others that you're going to need to help you along the way. And of course, the equation also articulates an aspirational vision for the future about where you want to get to, more fully realized, more embodied, more thriving, and why you're doing what you're doing, which, of course, as Zoe said, will really help you keep going when the going gets tough.
Absolutely. And when you've got a real picture of what success means to you, then it's going to be much easier to keep connected to it when the going gets tougher. You can be super tenacious because it's your path. It's nobody else's. It's you are the hero here. And that, I think, can feel more empowering. And you're on your own Dorothy yellow brick road here, rather than just pushing through like what might feel like mud or treacle, I guess. And if we said before, your story so far, which is what we've connected with through lots of episodes of the Career Equation podcast, can really help you to explore more about when you've been at these sort of story points in the past, when you've made a commitment to something, when you've gathered resources for your quest, when you've been in the belly of the whale moment or at that supreme ordeal moment. And reflecting on those will help you in your current circumstance to keep going, will help you understand, what have I learned from that? What would I do if I approach this differently this time? How will I change it? Who do I need to help me do this that I've missed in previous occasions? All super vital key pieces of information, treasure almost, for your map as you move forward.
And look, change, uncertainty, it happens. It's an inevitability of life. But having a map and a framework for understanding a little bit about how I personally navigate it is bound to give you more anchor points. And to do it in a creative and story-bound way aligns with our perspective that a narrative framework, a framework that relates to your biography, that has this sense of story and past, present, future, can be really useful for activating the creative brain and coming up perhaps with solutions, ideas and connections that you might not have made otherwise. And we see this again and again when we work with clients. At Savills, for example, the hero's journey was a key part of the Next Chapter programme, which was for very senior leaders who were looking at their next work and life chapters. And we used the framework, we mapped it out actually on the floor in this structure of the clock, as I've told you about, and gave these leaders a chance to just step onto the map relating to where they found themselves in their career decision making right now, in their career journeys right now. Of course, everybody's going to be at a different stage, a different phase of the wheel, and answering a different question for themselves about what they want. But there's something very powerful about stepping physically onto a map and seeing others on the path. And they might be close to you or further away. They might be further along or just beginning. But of course, they're all on their own unique quests and challenges. It's their hero's journey, but you share the experience of being on one. And then in our one-to-one coaching that followed that group work, we helped each of those clients mark their spot on the hero's journey and to talk in a much more kind of personalized way about where they are and what they might need to move forward and who they need to connect with, what the journey might be, what the timeframes might be, what feels familiar, what feels uncomfortable, so that they could really expand into what's my next step and stage and have that clarity of direction and purpose. And the same with all of our one-to-ones, really. We're always tracking where might someone be on the map and how do we help them to move to the next stage. And of course, you'll see these hero's journeys moments again in our formula episodes when we're talking to people about their own careers. Paul, who was about to give up his music career until his video got 2 million hits. Or Lucy, who thought, what have I got to lose? And just took the leap and went on an enormous adventure. Hero's journey moments crop up over and over again when we step outside of what's known and decide to pivot, to be curious, or to try something different.
It's so true. And also, I think what's really important for younger listeners or for people who work with younger listeners, that it isn't just beneficial, this, for people with lots of career experiences or life experiences. We've used this framework too with early careers programs, really helping talent to see what rich information they've already got about themselves that they can draw on for their future adventures. And that can be experiences from education, from hobbies, from work experience, from volunteering, from friendships. All of those kind of key pieces of information are just as important when you're stepping into your world of work at 16, 17, 18 and beyond, as it is when we're in our 50s doing it. So it's not to say that you can only use this kind of framework as a resource when you've got a lot of experience already. It's super, super powerful for anyone stepping into the world of work for the first time. And you're absolutely right. We've definitely had some hero journey moments from our guests on the pod so far. I remember Jonathan Black, who went from I'm over it to launching up and starting something new within 6 months. And Marcy, who used our own sort of co-parenting challenges to fuel a new business idea. So there's definitely been belly of the whale moments, I'm sure, throughout those processes, as well as the supreme ordeals.
Yeah, it's so true. And you remind me that I've actually taught this workshop to 10 and 11-year-olds who didn't get into the school of their choice. It's probably the first time that their parents expressed strong disappointment about them not accomplishing something. And being able to tell them, look, I also didn't get into the school my parents wanted me to, but my life turned out all right. You've got space and time for these adventures to happen, and not everything has to have its happy ending. You don't always get what you think that you want. So it's a really important framework for that resilience about how life happens at any age and stage. And of course, in our own lives, we've had experiences of walking this journey. I know that the shared experience of setting up the podcast, that was definitely a hero's journey, from like 0 to launch in 3 months. And then things we couldn't even have anticipated, like being on New and Noteworthy on Apple and hitting the #1 spot for a bit. And all these kinds of exciting things happened along the way. So that has felt like quite a kind of joyful explanation. But I know that, for example, my own journey with infertility, that was an absolute nightmare. And there were loads of times I wanted to give up and I really hated the journey that I was on. And rehab from the accident, I consider the accident to be a call. The call was, you now can't move, get up again. And it didn't feel like there was any choice. There was very, very much a push. But there was an element of pull of, let me see how far I can get if I just challenge convention and accepted wisdom about spinal cord injuries. And let me just be curious. There have definitely been plenty of like health and identity based ones for me recently. How about you, Zoe? Where do you identify with hero's journeys that you've been on over the years?
I think there's definitely 2 examples where one felt more like a push and one felt like a pull. So the pull for me was definitely to reconnect with my artistic side. and start picking up the old paintbrushes and pencils and designing stuff as well. And that's been an amazing journey, super tough as well along the way, but one that I definitely wanted to do. But in terms of a push, definitely the first time I faced, well, actually, it wasn't the first time, the second time I faced redundancy in my adult life. But in the second time was much better equipped to say, okay, this is happening to me, right? I got that. But now how am I going to take control of the situation so that actually what comes out of the back end of this is something that I want to happen to me rather than being done to? So some definitely like really different feelings at that call stage of being pulled or pushed for both of those examples. But actually, both of them have experienced the other bits, the quest, the belly of the whale, and definitely the supreme ordeal. So it's interesting that no matter how you go into the journey at the beginning, whether it's being pulled or pushed, actually the stages still happen as you go through and you still come out the other end.
And I hope that we have convinced and inspired you to check out the hero's journey. We will put a visual for it in the show notes for you and on the website, so you can access that and take a look. But there's also lots of information out there in the world about the hero's journey. Just type that in, hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and you'll find lots to really absorb you around this. But takeaway wise, in terms of your own next steps around this, if you are an individual, I want you first of all to explore this idea of being the central character. If you don't like the word, you like the word hero, great. If you don't, the central character. And just reflect on times in your life where you have been on this journey before. So what can you already take away from looking back and reflecting on heroes' journeys you've been on before that might help you now? And remember, they don't have to be in the world of work. They can be in any field of your life. And then get curious about who you are now, not just who you were. So what is it that evolved and changed as a result of you being on that journey? When you left home for the first time, that first year of independence, how did that shift and change who you were and your sense of identity? When you fell in love for the first time and had your heart broken for the first time, how did that shift your sense of identity and self? What did you learn? And third, if you were thinking you're not in, some of you may be going, I know I'm on a hero's journey and this has helped me map where I am. But some of you may be wondering what's next. And so maybe this language instead of what's calling me, or what might I be resisting, or what do I fear that I need to face and step into, might help to conjure up some new ideas, because the hero's journey also works with this more creative element of the brain as opposed to where's my next promotion coming from. Kind of opens up the possibility. So try with these questions. What's calling me? What might I be resisting? And see how that shows up and how that sits in terms of where you're trying to get to in your work.
Brilliant. And I think for companies, how might you use this framework? Just a couple of invitations really is to think about using the Hero's Journey framework as a kind of mapping exercise for perhaps group change initiatives where you can really harness the power of the story. So you can almost map the change initiative or the project as a journey. What's the call here? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the resources, the quest? What is it we need to gather to take us along this journey? But what's really important about the sort of mapping process for Hero's Journey I think for projects and ideas is that we have a really strong sense of what the return is going to be before we even begin. So we really create this image of if we do this thing, folks, this is what's going to be the outcome. This is the eureka moment, because that way you can then begin to map the journey much more about, okay, so what have we got to commit to here? Who do we need to help us along the way? Like, where's the difficulty? Where do we foresee the sort of belly of the whale and the supreme ordeal? So really helpful storytelling where it really gathers people along with you, much like why we sit round a fire and listen to stories, or why we embark on watching an epic film, because we want to see it. We've seen the trailer and it sounds great. So let's get on with it. So some great ideas there. Another thing to think about is celebrating the return. We talked earlier about how we often come out the back of projects and leap straight back into the next thing. So really take the time, regardless of whether the outcome is exactly what you wanted from the project in the first place, but really take the time to honor the discoveries that you've made, to mark the process, to share the learning, to think about how would we do this differently if we did it again? What can we share with others? So that we really take time to center in on the momentous thing that we've just done before we embark on the next thing. I think that's really important. And one other thing I'd invite you to think about is, how can you personally tell stories to each other using a map? Erica and I talked about that. We've done it in group environments as well, that it might be interesting to see, like, where do people feel they are on the map in relation to their careers right now? And how can you support each other with those next steps where they are on the journey?
And look, a career isn't just a set of jobs, is it? It is a grand adventure with twists and trials and triumphs. It is one of those choose your own adventure books where you have to be at choice point. And so embrace that. And I hope that this structure of the hero's journey can really support you in embracing that and having that sense of the story rolling out ahead of you.
Absolutely. And I think anything worth doing will be hard. I think we know that there's no easy wins, or very few, but that's what makes the journey so worth it, that we actually come out the other side having accomplished, even if it's just personal growth, let alone this huge achievement. When you do see yourself as the hero, you realize, like, I'm actually built for this. This was my journey and I am the hero in it. And if you don't like that language, I am the central character, whatever it is. It's for me and it's my journey. So it's up to me to push through it. Yeah. So why not book a call with us, a free call? Just visit thecareerequation.com and then we can talk to you about what that path, that story is, and your adventure, whether that's individual, as a coach, or as an organization.
So whether you are mapping your own individual hero's journey, whether you're a coach going, oh, this sounds interesting, I'd quite like to add this to my toolkit, whether you're an organization mapping out change and thinking this could be helpful for framing people's career transformations or our organizational transformation, we would love to help. Enjoy.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff. And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.